Thank you very much. And I have to say that when I first had this idea and talked to Lisa, I talked to a lot of people about disability issues, and rarely have I had anyone say, that's a great idea, let's pursue it, let's do it. So I really want to express thanks to the bookstore staff because they have embraced this, came up with creative ideas to pursue it. And that is really nice because it doesn't always happen. So thank you, Lisa, and thank your staff. I just want to mention two things before I introduce speakers. The first is that this is a celebration. I think in the disability movement, we do a lot of working, we do a lot of asking people to call legislators and come to meetings and send letters and all sorts of things, but I don't think we do a lot of celebrating. So I really wanted this to be a celebration, and I appreciate that you all came to join in that. And I remember reading a quote years ago from, I think it was Emma Goldberg, if I can't dance, I don't want to be part of your revolution. And for us, I think we need to celebrate this revolution of making a society that everybody can participate in. So thank you very much for coming to be part of this. Another thing is, I think we need to celebrate history. And we chose this week for the event because almost 30 years ago, about 120 people sat in at a federal building in San Francisco for about a month. It's the longest sit-in in the federal building in U.S. history. And they had various types of disabilities, and they sat in to protest the fact that a very significant disability law, the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, was passed, and no regulations were issued to enforce it up to 1979. So actually, no, it was 77. So that's almost 4 years of not having regulations passed to enforce a very important law to implement it. And this was a law that would require any federal agency or any company contracting with a federal agency to be accessible and to employ people with disabilities. So this was a watershed piece of legislation. It was a model for the Americans with Disabilities Act, and yet 4 years after it was passed, it still wasn't being implemented. So I think it's really important as we sit here today to recognize the pioneers who, at a time when disability wasn't a big national issue, they went and they sat in that building and took physical risk to not have food, maybe not have things they needed medically, but to sit in and say, this is very significant and we need to make this a national issue. It's also important to note that many groups supported them. The Black Panthers brought meals in. There was a group of gay and lesbian people called the Butterfly Brigade that came and provided things to them. It really was a celebration of difference and supporting each other to make society better. So as we celebrate today, let's keep those folks in mind that that was a very courageous step for them to take. And we need to remember that, and we need to remember disability history because of that. So as part of that, to create our own disability history here at KU, please make sure you sign a poster before you leave because you're all part of this now. And thank you. Now I'd like to introduce our first speaker, and that is Dr. Catherine Nemeth Tuttle. And I don't know her, I met her recently, but I do recall that several years ago, Glenn White, my advisor, brought a student from Vietnam to study with him and work on her master's, and she pursued a project that she could bring back to Vietnam and replicate to make society in Vietnam more welcoming for people with disabilities. And I remember her speaking so appreciatively of Dr. Tuttle and her role on her committee. So please welcome Dr. Catherine Nemeth Tuttle.
Thank you so much, Dot. I am very humbled by the invitation to greet you today on behalf of the university and Student Success, the area that I work for, on this very important and historic day. And indeed, it was a great pleasure for me to serve on that committee and be a part of that important effort. I think we have already been introduced to the history of this particular week and this day. And I believe that this Disability Studies, Disability Rights section will educate all of us on this important history, the present realities, and the evolving future. You can still use that word in Kansas, can't you? All right. Evolving future of disability rights in this country and the world, where it is estimated that there are 500 million people with disabilities, and over 80% of those individuals live in developing countries. This disability studies rights section will help address a primary disability issue, invisibility. Ralph Ellison said, "I am invisible because people refuse to see me." These books and the lives they represent will help our vision, and we must see them. I want to stop and say that one thing I wanted to mention at the beginning in terms of some of my connection with this effort, in addition to my work on that committee, is with Academic Achievement and Access Center, and the director is Mary Ann Rasnick, and her staff play an important role on this campus with disability resources. Kim Bates is joining us here today, Melissa Manning, Andrew Shoemaker, and the rest of her staff make an important difference for students on this campus. To educate myself, I chose 2 books from the collection that Dot had let us know about early on. One of them, the title, is all I think I need to tell you, which is Nothing About Us Without Us. Nothing About Us Without Us. And this is just one of the books that I've had an opportunity to read. But I think I'd like to share with you something from a more personal account by Harriet McBride Johnson, Too Late to Die. Too Late to Die Young. Too Late to Die Young. And this is just a little personal comment from her. Because the world sets people with conspicuous disabilities apart as different, we become objects of fascination, curiosity, and analysis. We are read as avatars of misfortune and misery, stock figures and melodramas about courage and determination. The world wants our lives to fit into a few rigid narrative templates. For me, living a real life has meant resisting these formulaic narratives. Instead of letting the world turn me into a disability object, I have insisted on being a subject in the grammatical sense, not the passive me who is acted upon, but the active I who does things. I practice law and politics in Charleston, which I'll nominate as the most interesting small city in America. I travel, I find various odd adventures, I do my bit to help the disability rights movement change the world in fundamental ways. In love, as in life, every impossibility opens a door to some surprise. However many things may be entirely foreclosed or more trouble than they're worth, the possibilities that remain are so numerous, so varied, so far beyond the capacity of one person to experience, so marvelous, that they might just as well be infinite. So I too join this celebration, and I'm so thankful that you're all here today, and thanks to Dot for making this possible. Thank you.